Hi everyone and welcome back to the Coaching Observer. It was quite an interesting Rugby World Cup weekend. Any upsets? Maybe just one. I really enjoyed watching the games, but something I'm going to focus on today on my Rugby World Cup recap is definitely the Tier 2 nations, or as World Rugby likes to put it, developing nations, really giving us a few stunners. First up, Thursday night game, France vs Uruguay, right? Now, I understand that France is trying a few new players at different positions, and maybe it's not their strongest, which most teams aren't going to put out their strongest against the Tier 2 nations. South Africa, Romania, we saw the same. France, Namibia, we saw the same. So it's understandable getting guys game time, bleeding them in, do what they need to do. However, I don't think anyone thought that Uruguay was going to pack such a punch. Now, what did they do right? Multiple things, right? Not only could they retain the ball, they really gave them a go at ruck time. And I just think France just couldn't get ball to hand the way they wanted to. How many scrums were there? And yes, sometimes scrums were dominant from France, but Uruguay really stepped up on defense and they really made the hits where they need to matter, and especially turnovers. Turnovers in the 22, France visited plentiful, right? However, Uruguay stopped them in their tracks, made sure they get turnovers at ruck time and get out where they need to. I also really enjoyed the brand of rugby Uruguay is playing. They weren't scared to, just let the ball flow from left to right. They weren't scared to make the hits. And yes, South Americans, right? We expect them to be good with ball to boot. And they really were. I think the one cross kick was amazing. They're really showing us elements which are great. But something I want to commend over here is, why is a nation like Uruguay suddenly stepping up? We've seen it in their sevens in the HSBC World Series as well, is Uruguay is now kind of establishing themselves. I want to give credit to the Super Rugby Americas. I think this is allowing players to get professional contracts, really spend time with regards to the rugby world and get more game time. Where if we're looking at different countries, such as Namibia, who's an amateur nation, right? They don't have their own professional league. Their domestic league, actually, they are part of the South African domestic league, and they don't even play in the Premier Division there. They really struggle. So that's a huge difference between Uruguay and Namibia for me. And something else I want to chat to you guys about, which is another nation which is coming up, which is also an amateur nation. They do have quite a good domestic league, but there's different reasons for why they're really improving so much. And Portugal, everyone watched Portugal versus Wales. First off, a lot tighter than what we thought, right? I won't lie, I didn't quite enjoy the colors, both the away kits, apparently something to do with, people who are colorblind and they can't see the different teams. So we had the black and the white. It was quite interesting. And I think something that leads to Portugal's success is that of Rugby Europe. Now, if you don't know this, they weren't always in Rugby Europe, but they qualified, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. I think they actually beat Germany to qualify. And once they've qualified, they've been dominant. So in the past, it's usually Georgia, Romania, Spain, right? Now, if you don't know this either, Spain fell out because they used a uneligible player, and they would have come to the World Cup. However, they dropped 10 points, pushed Romania up to second, and suddenly Romania came through. So I think Romania is having a bit of a tough time, so I'm not going to chat too much about that. I saw a lot of injuries on Saturday against South Africa as well. Something I'm going to chat to you guys about is Portugal. So it shows you that these nations who are able to get game time, who are able to compete at a higher level, although Rugby Europe isn't like top, it really makes a big difference, and it allows us to be a little bit more competitive at World Rugby time. So I think that the general development, right, that the DIR is doing at World Rugby is amazing. If you don't know what DIR stands for, it's Development and International Relations. They are pretty much in charge of all the development for these type of structures of your developing nations, right? If you look at the Asias, at the South Americas, even at the Africas and stuff like this, they do a lot of groundwork to get that in. Another team I want to talk to you guys about, and they used to be a Tier 1 nation, 2019 World Cup, Japan. And something that really helped them become a Tier 1 nation, in my opinion, is Super Rugby. So if you can remember Super Rugby, they had a team in there. It was called the Sunwolves, and it was about 80 to 90% the Japanese national team. So just as much as that really assisted them, the downfall of now only having a very good Japanese domestic league, which they do, and South Africans are pumped in there, New Zealanders are pumped in there. It's a good league. However, I feel that it's played to the detriment of Japan, and it's showing out at the World Cup. I think the first World Cup game that Japan played guys, it wasn't up to scratch. They're leading up to the World Cup as well, not up to scratch, right? I mean, dropping games to Samoa and Fiji, I think, it was just nowhere. And the players haven't changed that much. If you look at, who's starting and who's the head leads, like Michael Leach, and they still have Yatomoa on the wing. Like, they're still very strong players. But I just think they're missing a dynamic, which for me is the Super Rugby element. Now, another team, and the last team I want to chat to you guys about with regards to the recap, and it's a total turnaround. In 2019 World Cup, I wouldn't have placed them as a tier 1 nation, and they would have been regarded as a developing nation. Now, up to my Flying Fijians. Guys, I know I've gone on about the Flying Fijians in my previous video. I really wanted them to beat Australia on Sunday. They did, which I'm ecstatic about, and I love the way they beat them as well. Upset, not upset. I think I was expecting it a bit, but something I want to chat to you guys about is how do you give them credit? Now, to me, I want to give Super Rugby Pacifica the credit. So we all know that South Africa pulled out of the Super Rugby. They're now in the URC, right? And what they did is they pulled in a Fijian team and they pulled in a Samoan team. Fijian Drua is now the Fijian team. And guys, it's again, just like Sunwolves used to be, it's 80 to 90% the Fijian national team. So bar the guys playing in Europe, right? So if you're looking at Tuisoa, if you're looking at Radradra, if you're looking at Botia, these guys, they're still playing their rugby mostly in France. But the rest of them are all Fijian Drua, and it's really helped them create that system. They've become tactical, they've become strategical, and this is all given credit to Fijian Drua. I'm sorry that Moana Pacifica, which is the Samoan team, Samoa's not quite there, and bringing in some superstars as well. They need to find their feet, but they are still doing a lot of physical games and stuff. They're just missing a few elements, and especially again, the island teams always lack a little bit of discipline coming across the board. So yeah, Fiji to me now definitely a tier 1 nation. I think they've established themselves even in the top 6, not even in the top 10, and they're definitely a team now that might go through. So if we're looking at this weekend's game, which I'll be covering in my next video, I'm definitely covering South Africa Ireland because it's a pool decider. And I wish I could, but I'm not going to have time. Wales Australia this weekend is also going to be the decider. Is Australia going to be out of the World Cup and not make the quarterfinals, and then Fiji makes quarterfinals for the first time possibly, right? So it all depends who wins between Wales and Australia this weekend, and I'm excited to see that. So yeah, I hope that this was enlightening. I hope that you guys enjoyed the content, and maybe, giving you guys a bit of insight of how these nations are doing so well, why they're doing so well, and what holds for the future for the other developing or tier 2 nations that are coming into this, and how they can really excel and even make the World Cup more competitive. Namibia has joined every single World Cup since I think 95, and they're just not competitive. They've never won a single game. However, in Africa, they are the second strongest team, clearly, because they're always competing. It's South Africa and Namibia. I want to see, where's Kenya? Kenya, again, didn't make the repertoire. They didn't qualify. Same as Uganda. These teams need to start coming up, and I want to see it. Same as Zimbabwe. I mean, if you look at their sevens, Kenyan sevens, Zimbabwean sevens as well, Uganda sevens are coming up as well. I mean, they're really investing in there. And then in their 15s, it's a complete flat, right? It's almost like they give everything to the sevens and they're not focusing on the 15s. But the way the money wheel turns is around 15s. We see that in South Africa. A lot of sevens players has actually left the sevens contract and gotten into the 15 setup. And now, luckily for us, we see them on the world stage. Cheslin Colby's, Arensa, these guys, right? And we love them on the field. Now, these are the type of things that these developing nations need to figure out to get our World Cup a bit more competitive. Right, guys, I really hope you enjoyed this content. Thank you so much for following this journey with me. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. And please wait for the next video. Cheers, guys.